QuickBooks Pro Desktop 2021. Create reports after second month, including comparative financial statements. Let's get into it with Intuit's QuickBooks Pro Desktop 2021. Here we are in our Get Great Guitars practice file homepage. We currently have the open windows open. You can open the open windows by going to the view dropdown, selecting the open windows list. We're going to be imagining we're at the end of the second month of data input. We haven't entered the adjusting entries. We will talk about adjusting entries later, but we want to think about the reports that we could print out after the second month of operations. The second month of operations is going to give us more complexity in terms of the types of reports we can do, because now we can think about comparative reports that we can be adding. When we're thinking about doing this, we're thinking about providing this either to a customer or to a supervisor, usually in the format of a attachment like a PDF type of file. And so we want to think about how to basically print them as a PDF or an Excel file, and then how we can easily attach them and make it as easy and presentable to be picking up from, say, the customer's type of side of things or the client side of things. So let's open up our reports. First, we want the financial statements reports. Those are going to be the main two reports we will start out with. So let's go to the reports drop down, open up the balance sheet. So I'm going to open up the balance sheet standard. Now, as we print the reports, we don't really need to drill down on them. We just need one time period. So this is going to be as of, let's say, 02/28/20. So the end of February, this is the second month of operations that we have here. Now I'm going to do some customization to the report. This will be just kind of standard types of customization I might do if I was to present the reports. You might want to memorize them if you want to do some of the standard customizations that are you can kind of customize to yourself, right? To your own type of reports. You don't want to go crazy on them, but a little bit of adjustment can differentiate. So I'm going to remove the date stamps to the right. I'm going to remove the pennies, and I'm going to make the negative numbers be bracketed. So let's do that up top in the custom reports up top. So I'm going to say, all right, we're going to say, let's go to the header and footers. I'm going to remove the date prepared, time prepared, and the report basis. And then I'm going to go to the fonts and numbers, and I'm going to make the fonts and numbers with the red numbers for negative numbers. And I like to see the parentheses instead of a negative around them. And then I'm also going to be removing the pennies, removing the cents from the report. So I'm going to say OK. So there we have basically our standard type of balance sheet. Note again, you could be contemplating between a standard balance sheet and also a smaller balance sheet, like a summary balance sheet, for example. You could go to the reports drop down, company and financial. You can also give the summary balance sheet here, which would be as of 02/28/21. And it would look a lot shorter, right? So you could add that if you wanted to. You can put the summary on top, and then basically more detail with the adjusted balance, with the detailed or standard balance sheet on the second page. But I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to keep it with the standard balance sheet here. Those are just some options that you can think about. So here's where we stand in terms of the balance sheet. Let's open up, now I'm gonna keep this report. I'm gonna open up all the reports first, and then we'll go through and we'll print them out and think about how to print them out. So let's open up the profit and loss report now. I'm gonna go to the reports drop down, company and financial. I'm gonna go to the profit and loss standard report, changing the dates. Now this one you do need basically the date range. So you could do it just for the month of February, because we just finished February. You could do it for the period of January through February. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, in this report, I want to make it for January through February, and then I'll have a detailed report comparing the months, January and February, to themselves with a comparative report. But note, you have a little bit different options with the profit and loss report than the balance sheet. If I go back to the balance sheet, notice as of 2/28, the beginning date doesn't matter, because this is as of a point in time when we present the report. We might want to present a report as of the end of last month, but it's a little bit different than on the timing reports like the income statement. So we will do a comparative balance sheet as well, which you may or may not need to do, because the client probably wants to know where they stand right now, may not be as concerned to compare where they stood at as of the end of last month compared to now. Whereas the performance report, income statement, that is going to be important, right? I want to know how we're doing from the year to date, 2-month time period, and how we did for the current month, and how that compares to the prior month. So to do that for us, we're going to run this report as of 01/01/21 to 02/28/21 for the 2-month time period, and then we'll do a comparative report, which will break it out month by month and in a comparative fashion. I'm going to do the same kind of adjustments we did before, customizing the reports up top. We're going to go to the header and footer. I'm going to remove the date prepared, time prepared, report basis. You might also, if you want to like change yourself to other QuickBooks bookkeepers, change the name to an income statement, and that might, some people might like that a little bit more. It looks more like a traditional kind of format of hearing it, of seeing what that is. So if you start to customize that and memorize that, then that could be a way to kind of differentiate a little bit. Then we can go to the fonts and numbers. Once again, I'm going to make the parentheses around the negative numbers. I'm going to make them black or red from black, and then I'm going to remove the pennies, removing the pennies. And then let's say OK. So there's where we stand in terms of our income statement. Once again, you can think about having a summary income statement if you so choose, and using that and then breaking out the more detailed standard income statement. But I'm going to stick with the standard income statement, then we'll do comparative reports from that point. So the next report that we want to take a look at is possibly a comparative balance sheet and comparative income statement. I'm going to start with the comparative income statement because I think, again, that's probably more important than a comparative balance sheet. So let's do that. I'm going to start from the same point, and I'll construct this basically from scratch so we can put it together. Reports drop down, company and financial. We'll take a look at the profit and loss standard. Now, I'm going to basically convert the standard profit and loss and do the comparative profit and loss. So let's go to the custom reports up top. And then I'm going to change the dates. So I'm going to put it for the current time period, which is the current month, 02/01/21 to 02/28/21. So that's for the current month. I'm going to change the display columns to a month. So I want to pick this as of the month, and that'll kind of combine them, make the months more standard. So it doesn't see just the number of days, 28 days. It'll try to compare, but actually a month. And then I want to compare that to the previous period, which in this case will be the previous month. So I want to make sure that when I pick this up, it doesn't just see it as 28 days. So that's why I have to choose month here and then previous period. So let's say OK, and then we'll go from there. I'm going to say OK. And so now we have February and January. It puts the latest month first. Let's now make a difference column and a percent change column. So I'm going to go back up top and say, all right, now I want to see the change in dollars, change in percent. So I'm going to say OK. So there's the change in dollars. That'll take subtracting these two out. Here's the percentage change, taking the difference divided by the prior time period. So you can see the percentage change. That's kind of the standard format. Let's remove now these items like we normally do, remove the pennies, and make negative numbers bracketed and red. So I'm going to go to Customize Reports. We're going to go to the header and footer. Now we might want to change the name of the report to, again, from a profit and loss to an income statement, but now it's a comparative income statement. So I'm going to say comparative income statement. So comparative income statement. Then I'll remove the date prepared, the time prepared, and the report basis. Then we'll go to the fonts and numbers. I'm going to make it, we're going to make them red for the negative numbers and put the parentheses around them. Then we will remove the pennies. So that looks good. I'm going to say OK. So now we've removed this item over here. We've got the red numbers for the negative numbers, and we have removed the pennies. And the date, the name up top is now comparative income statement. That looks good. Now let's do the same thing for the balance sheet, which is a little bit different because we may not need it for the balance sheet. So you might not want one for the balance sheet, but they might want to compare where we stood to where we stand now. So, but it's more important for this report, the income statement most likely. So I'm going to go to the reports drop down, company and financial. Let's take a look at the balance sheet standard, and then we'll do the same thing. I'll customize this report, and I'm going to say, all right, let's make it for 02/01/21 to 02/28/21. And so there we have that. I want to see the previous period, both the changes here. I'll give us the changes. even though it might not be as relevant, but I'll do that. And then I'm going to say I want to pick this up for the month. So same kind of formatting there. Let's see what that does, and then we'll make the other adjustments. I'm going to say OK. So there we have it, February, January, the difference between the two, and then the percent change. And so then I can say, okay, now I need to change the name of the report, remove this items, and remove the pennies, and so on. So I'll go to the customized reports. I'm going to go to the header and footer, change it from the balance sheet to a comparative balance sheet. So comparative balance sheet. And then I'm going to remove the date, time, and report bases. Then in the fonts and numbers, I'm going to say we want the parentheses around it, red numbers for those items, and I want to remove the pennies, get rid of the pennies. So there we have that. I'm going to say OK. So that looks good. So now we have our comparative balance sheet here. So now we see where we stood last time compared to where we stand this time. So those are going to be basically our added kind of reports, these comparative reports that we might want to be including. Then you might also want to have the trial balance. It might not be something that you will provide to a customer, but if you're providing this to a supervisor, you can use the trial balance, and the trial balance is the best report basically to check your numbers. So let's open the trial balance by going to the reports drop down, accounting and taxes, trial balance, and then I'm going to adjust the dates. I'm going to do it for the 2-month time period, 01/01. Actually, let's do it just for February. No, the 2-month time period, 01/01. 21 to 02/28/21 for the trial balance. So notice if you have the 2 months, that'll make it more clear that it's a year to date down here because it does include the income statement numbers down below. So there's our trial balance. This is where we stand at this point. I'm going to customize the general customization, which is to go customize. I'm going to go to the header and footer, remove the date, time, and report bases. Then the fonts and numbers, and we'll put the parentheses there, make it red, and remove the pennies. So, okay. So there we have our standard kind of formatting for the trial balance, cleaning it up a little bit. So now this is where you want to check, if you're checking your numbers, check your trial balance, and then we're going to check the transaction detail report, and that's going to give us it will give you some more information to really check your numbers if you want to follow along with this. Now, in practice, the transaction detail report, it could be a report that you can use to prove to a customer how many transactions there are. And if you're charging by transaction, you might say, hey, look, I'm going to charge a fixed rate if your transaction number of transactions fall within a range. And this is a way you can do your billing. You can charge by chunks of transactions. You know how much you're going to charge if a customer has transactions that fall within a certain range. So let's go to our transaction detail report, reports drop down, accounting and taxes, transaction detail, and we want it by date. So I'm looking transaction detail list by date. And I'm just going to do this for the month of February. So I'm going to go into 01/21, 02/28/21. And so there we have it. Now, if you're checking your numbers then, if you had anything that was off on the trial balance, then you're going to want to go in here and check your transaction details for the month of February. And then if there's anything on our side, on this side that's not on your side, then you want to change your dates and see if it's a date problem. And if it is, then you can double click on it and fix it. And then if it's on your side, but it's not on our side, then you want to see if it's a duplicate type of transaction and see if it's something that has been duplicated and needs to be basically removed. So here we have our data here. And then once again, in practice, you can take this data and you can compare it, or you can provide it to the customer, or you can have a billing rate that might be based on a range of transactions. So you can try to, and that really makes the billing a little bit easier in my opinion. I would much rather do that than try to count my hours, because counting the hours takes up a lot of time, so if you can just standardize the billing possibly by the number of transactions you have and just count the transactions in your transaction report monthly and say, hey, look, you fall into this range and I bill you based on a range of transactions. If you go over that range, I bill you more based on that. So that's one way you can do that. Now, on this one, we can customize this report the same way. Let's do it. Let's go to Customize, headers and footers, and then we are going to remove the date prepared, the time prepared. We can go to the fonts and numbers, remove the pennies, and then parentheses around the brackets and make them red. And okay, so there we have that. So there's our reports. Now I want to basically memorize them, and then I want to save them, and then I want to be able to provide them to someone else in as easy a way as possible, typically by email, to email it as easily as possible. Now, if you email through here, there might be, they're talking about getting a way to email it so that you can have multiple attachments through the system. That would be great. But typically you need to download it so that you can then group them together and then email them in one email. If you send 5 different emails, that's not very, that looks kind of sloppy. And so you kind of want to download them and then maybe even zip the file or put them all in one PDF file, which I'll show you how to do here as well. So let's go ahead and memorize the reports first. So you might want to memorize them. So I'm going to say, let's memorize them. This is this transaction detail list. Save in the memorize report group. I'm going to say I want to put it in a memorize report group that we're going to save it in. I'll just put it into the accounting group. Share this report template with others. I'm going to say okay. And let's do that for the trial balance. I'm going to go ahead and say I want to save this. Let's go ahead and memorize this report. And I'm going to put it into just accounting and say okay. Balance sheet. This is going to be the comparative balance sheet. Let's memorize that one. Memorize comparative trial balance sheet. Okay. And then the profit and loss. So this is the profit. This is the comparative. So I'm going to say customize, or not customize. Memorize that one. Say okay. And then we had the standard balance sheet. You might want to memorize. So memorize balance sheet. And you might want to put you might want to differentiate. I'll put number 1. There's that one. And then we have the other profit and loss. And I'm going to say memorize this one. Profit and loss number 1. So you might want to memorize them so you can go back in there more easily and not have to do those adjustments each month because it'll memorize those customizations. And then let's go ahead and print these out. I'll do it balance sheet first. So let's go to the balance sheet. Now I'm going to save it as a PDF and then print it. When you save it as a PDF, you could use the printer option up top and save it here. I like to use that cute PDF printer that we have set up. It's a free program to do, so I like to practice just using that because it's useful to know about. So here's the cute PDF printer. I'm printing it to the cute PDF printer. So I'm going to go ahead and say, all right, print that out. And so then it's going to say, where do you want to put it? And I'm going to put it on the folder that we have set up on the on our. Now I'm setting up a folder simply going to be called Section 2, Month 2 Data Input. And so you might want to set it up, obviously, if you have clients, then you want to set it up by client, and then you want to set it up maybe by year that you are working in. And then once you label these reports, you might actually want to put the date in place. And if you have multiple years in one folder, you might want to start it off with the year ended, like 21 first, and then February the 28th. So you might actually reverse the order so that it will order it by first year, then month, then day. So, but if you have all the 1 year every year in the same folder, then you can just put, you can put it in the same year and possibly not order it that way. So in any case, I'm not going to do that here because this is a practice file. We're just going to put it in here as of the balance sheet. So this is the balance sheet, and then you might want the date 02/28/21. So again, if you are ordering this in your folder and you want to make it in order as nice as possible, you can put the date up front, possibly year, month, day. Okay, so then I'm going to say save. So there we have that. Now, I also want to export it to Excel. So I'm going to export it to Excel. I want to have it in Excel. I might not provide Excel to somebody else, but I also want to use that to group my reports into one long PDF file. We'll show you how to do that using the PDF printer and this item. And this is going to be very impressive to provide to someone oftentimes if you can have one attachment with all your reports, because it looks like you have Adobe, you can adjust Adobe, right? With it. So let's go ahead and say we're going to print it, and I'm going to create a new worksheet. So it's going to be in a new worksheet in a new workbook. That's what we want. So I'm going to say okay. You do have to have, of course, Excel in order to link it. So if you have Excel then you can do this process and export it, which is quite nice. So there it is. I'm gonna remove the first tab. This is the normal scenario. I'm gonna delete this. I'm gonna abbreviate the name. I'm just gonna double click on the name, call it the balance sheet, just the BS for the balance sheet. Then I typically will go to the second screen, the page layout, and say OK, because that shows me that there's these page splits, which I don't like. So I'm gonna go to the View tab up top and remove the splits. And then you can also see the header up top, which will be there when you print it, and you can see if this report extends more than one page and adjust it if it does so. Then I'm going to go back to the first tab. That looks good. Let's save it. I'm going to go to File tab up top. I'm going to save it into our folder. So it's in Section 8, and I'm just going to call it Financial Statements. Financial Statements. And I'm going to say this is for 02/28/21. And then OK, and yes, the following features can, okay, that's fine. And then I'm going to close it, and I'm going to just save the other ones into another worksheet in this same workbook. So I'm going to close this out. Let's do this for the income statement now. So I want to look at the income statement, or now the profit and loss income statement. So I'm going to save this as a PDF first. So I'm going to go, all right, let's go to the print. I'm going to use the Qt PDF printer to practice doing that. Printing this out, and then it's going to say, where do you want to put it? I'm going to put it right next to the balance sheet, and I'm going to call this the income statement. So income state, and I'm going to just call it statement, and then this is going to be 02/21/21. So we'll go ahead and 02/28/21. Okay, let's save that. And there we have. Now let's export it to Excel. Go into Excel. This time we're going to create a new worksheet, but we're going to put it into an existing workbook. So I say create a new worksheet, and then we want to put it into an existing workbook, the one we just made. Browse. I'm going to find that workbook that we just made, and it's going to be on the desktop. It's going to be in the QuickBooks data, and Section 8, there it is, double-clicking that item, opening it up, and then we should be able to export it to it. So there we have it. I'm going to do the standard customization. So I have the workbooks on this side. Now I'm going to left-click on it and pull it to the right. I'm going to click on this first tab, don't need it, right-click on that tab and delete it. Say OK, and then I'm going to double-click on the name down here so I can call it an IS. I'll just call it for the income statement. And then I'm going to select this page layout tab and say OK. That shows us the page splits, which is in the View tab up top. I'm going to go in the Windows group, turn them off. There's the header. That looks good. Back to the first page. It all fits on one page. That looks good. I'm going to go ahead and close this out and save that, and we'll keep pushing forward on that. So now we want the comparative balance sheet. So now I'll look at the comparative reports. Here's the comparative balance sheet. Same process. I'm going to go, all right, print the report using the Qt PDF printer here. It's going to ask me where do we want to put it. I'm going to say, I'll tell you where we're going to put it. We're going to put it here, same spot, and it's going to be a comparative balance sheet. And this is going to be as of 02/28/21. So I'm going to save that. Let's export it. Go into the Excel. I'm going to create a new worksheet, and then I'm going to put it in the same workbook, existing workbook. It should already be going where I want it to, but I'm going to hit browse anyways and just double check it. Like, yeah, that's where I want it. And then I'm going to say, all right, that looks good. Let's export it. Let's do our formatting now. I'm just going to grab this sheet. I'm going to left click on it, drag it to the right. I'm going to remove this first tab, right clicking on it, deleting it. And then I'm going to go to this sheet that I just created, double click on it, and I'm going to call it a comparative balance sheet. And then I'm going to go to the page layout tab and say, OK, that shows me the page splits. Go to the View tab up top, Windows group, remove the page splits. We see the name up top. That looks good. Fits all on one page. Looks good. I'm going to say OK. And close it back out. Yes. And now let's do the same thing for the comparative income statement. So here we have that. Let's print it out. I'm going to go to the printing option, print the report, say OK, and we're printing it using the Qt PDF printer. So it's going to ask us where do we want to put it once again, and I'm going to say that we want this in the comparative income statement, and then I'm going to say yes or save, and then let's export it. So I'm going to Excel, create a new worksheet, and then we're going to put it into that same existing workbook. So there it is, existing workbook. On the existing workbook, it should be going to the same spot now. I'm not even going to check it. It's going to be good. And save that or export. Here we have it. Go through our standard process. I'm going to left click on the sheet, drag it to the right, and then go to the first sheet. I'm going to right click on it and delete it. Don't need it. And then go to the sheet again, double click on it. This is going to be a comparative income statement. And then we will go to the page layout tab over here, say OK. And then I'm going to go to the view up top. We're going to remove the splits. So remove the split and then go back to the first tab. So that looks good. So I'm going to say, okay, let's close this out. Save. And yes. So there we have that. And then we can do the same for the trial balance. Let's go to the trial balance. And I'm going to do the same process. We will print it. Print the trial balance. Okay. It's going to ask us where do we want to put it. I'm going to say I want the trial balance going to there. It's going to be trial balance, and that's going to be 02.28.21. And then we will export it using Excel again. Export, create a new worksheet. Once again, it's going to be going to, as you might guess, the existing workbook. Should already be going to the location, so I'm just going to simply export. There we have it. Let's drag this to the right now. Get rid of this first tab. Right click on it. Delete. Okay. Sheet tab. Double clicking on it. This is going to be the trial balance. I'll just call it the TB. Go into the layout view on the right saying OK. I'm going to go to the view tab up top. Remove the split. And so there we have that. Go back to the prior view and that looks good. Closing this back out. I'm going to say save. And okay, and then we're going to do one more for the transaction detailed report. So I'm going to go ahead and print this one out. Let's print it out and say, okay. Now notice this one, they might have trouble fitting it. So notice it kind of forced it, it looks like possibly to fit on one page. So remember this one you might want to look at the options, possibly print it landscape, preview it landscape. It might be a little larger doing that. So I'll do that. And then I'll go ahead and print that out. When you see it as a PDF, it doesn't really hurt for it to be in landscape. So you might want to just do it in landscape because that could increase the size of the font. And so I'm going to say this is going to be transaction list by date as of, this is 02/28/21. Save that. Let's export it to Excel. Excel dropdown, create new worksheet. Take it to an existing workbook. It should be going where we want it. Let's export it. Going to make this large. We're going to pull this sheet to the right. I'm going to go to the first sheet, which I will delete now. Right-clicking on it, delete it, and say delete. And then I'm going to double-click on the name, and I'm going to say transaction detail. I'll just call it that. And then I'm going to go to the second tab, which is the page layout. Okay. See where the splits are. Go to the view tab up top. Remove the split. Notice this doesn't fit on one page now, so I'm gonna want to adjust it. Here, this little dotted line means that's where the page break is. I don't want the page break like in the middle. I'm not. It's okay if it's 2 pages long, but not a page break like that. So I'm gonna say, all right, standard process to fix that. We could try to go to the page layout and make it from orientation to portrait to landscape. So I could say that fixes it a little bit. I can remove all these added lines, like I don't need this whole thing in February, so I'm going to remove from A to C. Just going to delete that entire thing. That's not necessary. And then if I remove all these middle lines, I'm going to hit the B, holding down Control. I'm going to do the same for D, F, H, J, L, M, and P. Right-click on one of those selected areas and delete those columns. And so now it looks like it fits on a page, so that looks good. So now we can save this. We can provide this to somebody as well. But we can also use it to put all of our reports basically on one PDF report using the Qt PDF printer. So let's do that. We're going to go to the File tab. Let's say we're going to print it. And we're going to print it, however, to that Qt PDF printer here. We want to print the entire workbook. The entire workbook is what we're going to print. And we're going to print it using that Qt PDF printer. So if we scroll down, this is what it looks like. We've got the balance sheet, the end of the balance sheet, income statement, the comparative balance sheet, the end of the comparative balance sheet, comparative income statement, and then the trial balance, and then the transaction detailed report, and the end of the transaction detailed report. It's 2 pages long, but it's not cutting off columns, so that's fine. So we're going to say, all right, let's go ahead and print that to the Qt PDF printer and see what we have there. So it should ask us where do we want to put that. And so we're going to put it here. I'm just going to call it financial statements. That looks good. I'm going to save it. Let's see what we have. Now, if we were to provide this to somebody else, we're going to say, all right, what do we have here in my data file? Let's go into the data file and say we're in section 8. I'm going to make these larger so we can see them. So we could provide them basically each one of these reports and attach basically, what would that be? 4 or 5 attachments, but that gets a little bit excessive. So we could zip it. So the other thing we could do is zip it. I could say, okay, let's put these all into one folder and say, call this financial statements for 02/28/21. And then I'll put these reports in it, including the balance sheet, the comparative balance sheet, the comparative income statement, and then these 3 could all go in there. And I can't attach this folder typically to an email, but if I compress it by right-clicking on it and sending it to a zipped file, then this one will actually save a little space when I email it, be more likely to email the thing, and it'll just have one attachment, which is a little bit nicer to receive, although it's still a zipped file and it still has all this other stuff that you got to unzip in order to read it. You could provide them with the Excel file as well, which might be useful for a supervisor, but maybe not so much for a client unless they would like it in that format. But you can use that Excel file to then have one attachment which has all the reports on it. So if you double click on this one and provide this to somebody, it can be looking a little bit more impressive because now it looks like you have something to adjust Adobe because you were somehow able to put these all on one PDF file, even though they're separate reports. So this one could be one of the more impressive kind of formats to be able to provide, and you can link it with just one with one link instead of multiple links. And remember, when you're providing reports to like clients or even internal reports to supervisors, the look of it is part of the process. So if you can make it look nice, then that's going to be beneficial. You want to basically say, hey, look, I'm doing everything. Everything looks good here. You can depend on me when you need it, which is probably at the end of the year when you actually need these reports for tax preparation, financial statement preparation, and whatnot. So I think that's the most impressive way to kind of present it. And again, if you're working with clients in bookkeeping, presentation matters. If you can do little things to differentiate your reports while still looking professional, then that might be good. If you can attach things in one attachment instead of 10, then that would be nice. Those things matter. So that's it.